thing that was amazing to me, and I come at this through the back door. Being a creative, I always thought I was the artist, and my dad was the writer. You know how you have roles that you place on everybody, and I don't want to get on his toes, start writing because he writes. You know, I got this little niche over here. I had a friend I had an advertising agency in the 80s and 90s, and I had a copywriter because I didn't feel comfortable writing copy. But I was always the one that came up with the concepts, and I would write the heading, and I'd end up rewriting a lot of the stuff he did. And when I got ready to do this, he said, "Terry, this, you don't need me. Do this, do it. And this is your project." And I said, "Man, this is such a huge project, David. I don't know if I can. It's a novel. That's a big deal, He says, "It's just like eating an elephant. One bite at a time." And he told me that, and that stuck with me the whole time I did this. I just started writing, and that's what writers do, is write. So
that's right.
even when you get stuck, right? You just write.
Keep going.
I found myself not knowing where the story was going to go, just writing, and then a light bulb would go off, and I'd go, "Oh, well, this goes here and that goes there," and it all fits and things like that. But I went to Mississippi College. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Mississippi College. I went to Mississippi College, got a graphics communication degree at Mississippi College, and had a great internship at Godwin Group in Jackson, Mississippi, and big agency. Felt really great about that. I've stayed friends with those guys up there ever since. Then got into, I was an art director in the 80s, through the 80s for an agency, and then got out on my own in '88. And I've been out on my own. I had a few little stints where I would work for somebody, but I would go back to it at some point because I love working for myself. I had big staffs and big overheads at times, and I realized that I was getting away from the creative element, and I had to pull back because I'm not a businessman. I tried to fool myself into thinking that several times, but I'm not a business person. I ran a business, but I wasn't very good at it, so I had to get people that knew better about that stuff than I did. So now I'm still working for myself. When you get older, as y'all know, you become a consultant. That's an expert. You know what an expert is, everybody?
No.
X is a has-been, and a expert is a grip under pressure. That's what we are. Yeah. But so I do a lot of consulting to agencies, and I go around and I'm the branding. You know, it's how funny. Back in the 80s, it was called logos and symbols and whatever. In the late 90s and the 2000s, it's branding. Everybody's doing branding. Well, that's just another word. But that's what I do, is I go around and help people brand. But you know what I found out about writing is it's the same thing. You're branding something, some concept or some idea. You're branding yourself at the same time as a person that writes these things. And when I was, let me go back a little bit before I wrote the book. I had a journal that I kept. Y'all keep journals? Y'all write stuff? Just write ideas, or write stories that you've heard, or maybe a sermon that you heard and you want to write some things down. I did that a lot. I had this journal, and it got thicker and thicker, and I was sitting in my lounge chair watching some TV one night, and I just really didn't know where I was going in my life. I said, "God, I know you want to use me to do something here." I teach a Sunday school class. Well, all those things that you do. But what's going to really leave a mark on this world when I leave? When I leave, who's going to say, "Yeah, he was here at one time"? So I got to thinking about that, and I was sitting in that chair, and he said two words to me. Has God ever spoke to you orally? When God speaks to you orally, it's more than orally. It's like inside and out. It's like more than your ears could ever hear. It's just so strong that it just resounds in your whole soul. And he doesn't mix words, and he doesn't sugarcoat things, and he doesn't. He only uses the words he needs to use, and that's another nice rule to have too. But use the words you need to use. But he said, "It's time." 2 words. Well, I knew exactly what he was talking about. He had already stuck it in my spirit that it was about this book. He said, "It's time." And when he said that, I started working on putting the book together. I got halfway through, exactly halfway through this book. I can show you where it was. And I stopped, and I couldn't go any farther. And I stayed there for weeks. And I prayed there for weeks. And I thought there for weeks. And I wondered where I was going to go with this. I had an idea of where the storyline needed to go and where the ending needed to be, because as I told you earlier, I had 2 or 3 books in mind. And I knew where I wanted to go with this book, but from that point, where? And so he said, just work backward. Now, all of your college professors will say, what? But that's what I did. I wrote the last chapter. Then I wrote this next to last chapter. Then I wrote the next chapter. And I met myself in the middle.
Wow.
And it pretty closely matched where I wanted to be. I had to do a few little things. Being from Mississippi College, I thought, well, I have an English minor. Anybody that... So don't ask me a lot of technical questions about English, because I'm not really... I took a... I went to see my English professor at MC. She's still there. Lee Harding is her name, and she was the hardest teacher, one of the hardest teachers. I take that back. She was the second hardest. Everything was oral. All the tests were oral. The midterm was oral. All the tests that we had in there were oral, and she graded on class participation. So I'm grading today on, at that time when I was in college, I didn't speak a lot. I was fairly shy. I made a C in speech because the guy liked me. That's the only reason I made a C. So it was very hard for me to come out of my shell in her class, but it really helped me a lot. We read. She made me sick. I read so much. I'd stay up and I'd just get sick because 2 and 3 novels a week.
Wow.
And that's fine if you just read for pleasure.
You have
But when you have to read these books, number one, and you have to comprehend what they have in there. And she used Cliff Notes, but she used Cliff Notes to ask the questions that they didn't ask.
Oh.
That's how she used Cliff Notes. So Cliff Notes and all those others did not help, because she would ask these obscure questions that they would never think about. And so when I was getting ready to send this off to a publisher to see if I could get my manuscript published, went to see her, and she says, well, there's she gave me a big, you know how many publishers there are in the world?
Oh, unbelievable.
It's amazing. Gave me this big list. She says, I think these hit your genre that you're trying to hit. These hit. I took that home, and I looked at that list, and I looked at that list, and I looked at that list, and I was like, I don't want to send my manuscript to all these. God gave me this story, and He put all this. Now, I will put a disclaimer here, because God might have a different way to go for you. Don't think that this is your way. But for me, this was the way that God directed. Okay? I just decided that wasn't going to be the way that I was going to do this. I was not going to send my manuscript out to 100 or 200 different publishers all over the world. I didn't feel like it. I didn't feel like that's what I was supposed to do. So I sat on that for a few weeks, and I prayed about that for a few weeks, and this one publisher kept coming up. I get an email. I mistakenly got on their website once. I don't know how I got there. You know how you ever have that? I have that happen, and I was like, "What am I doing here?" And then I realized, wait a minute, and I realized, but then that wasn't enough. I had to get one more email from somebody that said, "Have you thought about these people?" And this was a friend of mine, and I really think you need to talk to these people. And so I did. I sent them a manuscript. And I don't know if y'all sit by your mailbox and wait. You do that?
Yeah.
I was afraid to do that. I just sort of tried to put it out of my head as much as I could. So I sent it off, and I was like, knowing me, you're going to sit here and count the days and the hours and the minutes, and well, the postman, okay, he probably kept it for a day, and then he got it in the system, and you're thinking about when it's going to get there. I just tried not to do that this time, because I would do that any other time. So it probably 2.5 weeks later, I get a call. 2.5 weeks later, and from Dr. Tate, and he talks to me about everything but the book. He talks to me about my family. He talks to me about my faith. He talks to me about what I do for a living, how much do I write, all of the things that I was wondering when he was going to get around to the book, but he never did. And then at the end of the conversation, he says, "Terry, I really like your book, and they like your book in my office. I'm going to send you a contract. Expect it FedEx tomorrow." And then he said, there's a copy of the contract that you can show your lawyer, and then there's one that's sealed. When you get ready to sign everything, sign the seal, sign where it says to sign, and we'll do this thing. And that's where it all started.